Tonight's story is not just about soldiers. It is about signals, power, loyalty, fear, and one question hanging over Europe right now. What exactly is the United States doing? Because in the space of just days, Washington appeared to move in two opposite directions at once. First, the Pentagon halted a planned deployment of thousands of troops to Poland. Then President Donald Trump announced that America would send an additional 5,000 troops to Poland instead. Not 500, not symbolic, 5,000. And he did not frame it as some dry strategic update. He tied it directly to his relationship with Poland's President Karol Nawrocki. Suddenly, the biggest question was no longer just how many troops are moving. The real question became this: is U.S. military policy in Europe now being driven by long-term strategy or by personal politics and improvised messaging? And that is why this moment matters far beyond Poland. Because Poland is not just another NATO member. It sits on the alliance's eastern edge. It borders the war's wider danger zone. It has become one of the central logistical and political pillars of Western support for Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. CNN notes that Poland has served as the main hub for Western military aid flowing into Ukraine, while multiple reports underline that roughly 10,000 U.S. troops are already typically stationed there. So when Washington appears to reduce troops, then increase them, then leaves allies guessing what the real plan is, that uncertainty ripples across the entire NATO system. Let's slow this down. What actually happened? About a week before Trump's announcement, the Pentagon canceled or delayed a major planned troop movement involving a brigade combat team that had been expected to rotate through Poland and other Eastern European countries. CNN reports that the halted deployment involved the 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team, 1st Cavalry Division, and that some personnel were already in Europe when the order came down. The same reporting says the move, combined with the cancellation of a missile battalion deployment and other personnel changes, would cut the U.S. presence in Europe by roughly 5,000 troops. That alone already triggered anxiety. Then, almost immediately after the backlash, Trump announced the U.S. would send 5,000 additional troops to Poland. That is why European officials are now struggling to tell whether this is a net increase, a relabeling, a partial reversal, or simply a new announcement layered on top of old confusion. And the confusion is not imagined. Officials are saying it out loud. Sweden's foreign minister described the situation as confusing indeed and not always easy to navigate. Euractiv reports, she even added, with unmistakable irritation, that maybe social media negotiation is not the best thing. Al Jazeera reports that even U.S. defense officials were struggling to interpret the implications, with one official saying, "We don't know what this means either." That is the astonishing part of this story. The issue is not simply that America changed course. Great powers change course all the time. The issue is that allies, ministers, and even people inside the defense system appear to be learning policy in real time, through abrupt announcements, mixed messages, and political improvisation. Now look at how Trump explained the move. This is where the geopolitical story becomes political theater. Trump did not primarily sell the troop deployment as a response to a specific Russian escalation. He did not present it first as part of a grand NATO force redesign. Instead, according to BBC, DW, CNN, and others, he explicitly linked the deployment to the successful election of Polish President Karol Nawrocki, whom he said he was proud to endorse, and to their relationship. That wording matters. It suggests that under Trump, alliance reassurance may be shaped not only by defense planning, but by personal rapport and ideological alignment. Poland, under Nawrocki, is presented almost as the loyal ally that gets rewarded. For other European capitals, that creates a dangerous new variable. If Washington's strategic posture depends partly on whether the White House likes your government, then the alliance becomes harder to predict. And Poland, from Washington's perspective, is not a random choice. It has spent years trying to become America's most dependable military partner in continental Europe. The Guardian points out that Poland has consistently positioned itself as a top U.S. ally, with its troops previously serving alongside the United States in Iraq and Afghanistan. DW adds that Poland now spends about 4.48% of GDP on defense, the highest level in NATO according to 2025 alliance figures. In other words, this is a country that has done what Washington has long demanded from Europe: spend more, build more, align more, and take security seriously. So from one angle, Trump's move can be read as a reward to the ally that most closely matches his doctrine of burden sharing. But from another angle, it also sends a political message to others. Support the U.S. line, spend heavily, stay close to Trump personally, and you may keep America close. Drift away, criticize Washington, or resist U.S. pressure, and your position may become much less secure. That second message becomes even more obvious when you compare Poland to Germany. Earlier in May, several of these reports say Trump announced he would pull 5,000 troops from Germany, amid a dispute with German Chancellor Friedrich Merz after comments related to the U.S. war with Iran. BBC says Republican lawmakers criticized troop withdrawals from Germany because they risked sending the wrong message to Russia. CNN reports that Merz's statement about the U.S. being humiliated by Iran angered Trump. So now Europe sees a pattern. Germany appears to be punished during a political spat, while Poland is publicly rewarded after Trump highlights his bond with Nawrocki. Whether or not that is the full strategic reality, that is absolutely the political image being created. And in geopolitics, image matters almost as much as force levels. At the center of all this is a deeper fight over NATO itself. Trump's frustration with the alliance did not begin today. It has been one of the defining themes of his political identity for years. Al Jazeera, Guardian, BBC, and CNN all describe the administration's message in similar terms. Europe must take more responsibility for its own defense, spend more, rely less on the U.S., and stop assuming America will carry the burden forever. Marco Rubio repeated that message before the NATO foreign ministers' meeting in Sweden, saying alliances must work for everyone involved and that there must be a clear understanding of expectations. He also stressed that troop movements are not a punitive thing, even as he openly acknowledged Trump's disappointment with some NATO allies. That is the contradiction. Washington says these moves are not punishment. But politically, they often look exactly like pressure campaigns. That is also why NATO's reaction was so carefully calibrated. Officials welcomed the announcement, but they also sent a warning. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said he welcomed the move, yet emphasized that the direction of travel is toward a stronger Europe and a NATO that is less reliant on one ally only. That line appears in multiple reports and may be the most important sentence in the entire episode. Because beneath the relief in European capitals, there is a hardening conclusion. Even when Washington sends more troops, Europe can no longer assume the U.S. posture will remain stable, linear, or predictable. Better to welcome the reinforcements today while preparing for a future in which the American guarantee may come with more conditions, more volatility, and more political bargaining than ever before. And that is exactly what European ministers started saying, in public, almost immediately. Sweden's foreign minister said Europe must continue investing in its own defense and capabilities. Norway's foreign minister said Europe recognizes the U.S. desire to reduce troop numbers and that any drawdown must happen in a structured way so Europe can build up while America scales back. Lithuania's foreign minister, quoted by Euractiv, argued that keeping U.S. deployments in Europe remains in America's own interest and called it the cheapest way to keep the continent in peace. These are not comments from panicked fringe voices. These are allied governments trying to manage a new reality. Welcome U.S. support when it comes, but prepare urgently for the day when it may shrink, shift, or arrive wrapped in political conditions. Now, from Poland's point of view, this announcement is still a win, a very public win. But here is the catch. Even some of Poland's own statements hint that this may not be a dramatic expansion at all. CNN says Polish officials suggested the move may not substantially change troop numbers in the country. Al Jazeera similarly reports that Sikorski said the deployment would keep the U.S. presence more or less at previous levels. In other words, this might not be a huge new military buildup. It may instead be a political reset after a deeply embarrassing rollback. If so, then Trump's announcement is strategically less about adding strength than about repairing the message. And that message had been very damaging, that a frontline NATO state could be surprised by Washington, left guessing, and then reassured only after political blowback. And that blowback was real, including inside the United States. CNN reports that Republican lawmakers criticized the Pentagon for canceling deployments without consulting Congress and said Poland had been blindsided. Representative Don Bacon called the move reprehensible and an embarrassment to our country. That matters because it shows this is not just a partisan Europe versus Trump argument. Even within the American political and security establishment, there is concern that sudden force posture decisions can undermine trust with allies and create openings for adversaries. If your friends stop understanding your strategy, your deterrence weakens, even if your military remains powerful on paper. So what does Russia see in all this? None of these articles frame the move as an immediate response to a fresh Russian offensive. But the strategic backdrop is obvious. Russia's war against Ukraine continues. Poland remains a frontline state in the wider security map, and every sign of division inside NATO is valuable to Moscow. That is why these mixed signals matter so much. A troop increase can deter. A visible alliance split can invite testing. A confused chain of announcements can blur the picture. And blurred pictures are dangerous in high-stakes deterrence environments. Germany's foreign minister said the deployment serves not only Poland's security, but the security of the whole alliance. That line tells you how Europe wants this to be seen, not as a personal favor to Warsaw, but as a reinforcement of NATO's eastern shield. There is also a second war shadowing this story: Iran. Several of the reports say Trump and Rubio are deeply frustrated with some European allies over their response to U.S. operations in the Middle East and over their refusal to more strongly back Washington's position in the Iran conflict. The Guardian quotes Rubio criticizing countries like Spain for not allowing the use of bases, while BBC and Al Jazeera both say Trump's anger with allies over the Middle East hangs over the NATO discussions. So this Poland troop decision cannot be seen in isolation. It is part of a broader dispute over whether Europe is a grateful strategic partner or a freeloading, selective ally in Trump's eyes. That broader anger appears to be shaping how Washington talks about troop levels, alliance obligations, and who gets publicly praised versus publicly pressured. And that is why Europe is reading this moment as bigger than Poland. Because the real headline may not be 5,000 troops to Poland. The real headline may be Europe can no longer separate military planning from White House political moods. That sounds harsh, but the pattern supports it. A withdrawal from Germany amid a spat. A canceled Poland deployment that startled allies. A reversal announced on social media. A direct reference to Trump's relationship with Nawrocki. NATO ministers calling for better coordination. European leaders saying they must become less dependent on Washington. Taken together, this is not a normal force posture adjustment. It is a stress test for alliance management in the Trump era. So where does this go next? There are really three possibilities. The first is that this ends up being mostly cosmetic. The troop number in Poland remains roughly stable. The 5,000 figure is a repackaged fix to an earlier cancellation, and allied nerves calm down. The second is that this marks a new model in which the U.S. keeps a strong presence in select loyal states like Poland while reducing or reshuffling elsewhere. The third, and for Europe, the most worrying, is that this becomes the norm. Abrupt announcements, partial reversals, public improvisation, and constant strategic ambiguity. If that happens, then even when NATO survives institutionally, it becomes harder to coordinate psychologically. And deterrence is psychological as much as military. For Ukraine, the stakes are especially high. Poland's role as a logistical hub means that U.S. posture there affects more than Poland's national defense. It affects the wider ecosystem of support running eastward. If Poland feels secure, NATO's eastern corridor looks firmer. If Poland feels exposed or uncertain, then the alliance's most sensitive supply and deterrence architecture looks more fragile. None of the reports suggest the aid corridor is about to collapse, but they do show why predictability matters so much. In wars of attrition and geopolitical endurance, consistency is a weapon. Confusion is not. And for Trump himself, this move serves multiple purposes at once. It reassures a friendly leader. It rewards a country that spends big on defense. It counters criticism that he weakened NATO's eastern flank. It lets him look decisive after confusion. And it reinforces his preferred worldview. Allies should prove their worth, and relationships matter. The question is whether that worldview strengthens deterrence through selective rewards, or weakens the alliance by turning strategic clarity into a personal loyalty contest. That is the debate now unfolding behind the headlines. So here's the bottom line. Europe welcomed the troops. But Europe did not relax. NATO officials praised the decision. But they also doubled down on the need for Europe to stand more on its own. Poland celebrated. But even Polish officials hinted this may simply preserve previous troop levels, not transform them. And Washington projected strength. But it also projected unpredictability. That is the paradox of this moment. 5,000 troops may strengthen Poland. But the way this happened may strengthen Europe's belief that it must prepare for an America that is still powerful, still present, but far less predictable than before. And maybe that is the true story here. Not simply whether America sent troops, but what the announcement revealed. It revealed that in 2026, Europe is no longer only asking whether the US will defend it. Europe is asking under what conditions, on what timeline, after which political argument, and with how much warning. That uncertainty may be manageable in peacetime. It becomes far more dangerous in crisis. Because alliances are not tested when everything is calm. They are tested when events move fast, when choices are costly, when messages must be clear. Right now, the message from Washington is powerful, but it is also messy. And in geopolitics, messy messages can echo for a very long time.